Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Q&A podcast. I'm Phil Kitchener-Leedy. Sid Lowe is with me as ever. Hello, Sydney.
Good morning, Phil.
Now, usually this podcast is exclusively available at patreon.com/TSFP. Every Tuesday, we do a Q&A podcast for our patrons. They ask us questions. We attempt to answer them. But we thought we'd make this one available for everyone. So we're sticking this one up on YouTube. We'll also put it out as well on Spotify so you guys can hear just how fantastic this Q&A podcast is, and then give us €4.75 a month to have access to this and many, many other terrific podcasts and extra content. So, that's the strategy behind this one. We didn't put out.
I love the idea that it's a strategy. We are
We're known for our strategy.
Yeah.
We didn't put out the Monday podcast on YouTube because of some technical issues, so that's another reason to stick it up there as well. So, Sid, we've got loads of questions. Let's see how many we can get through. Maruti says, Hola, Spa. As a Barcelona fan, I'm glad that the club is run democratically. Yeah. But on days like these, where it seems the club is tearing itself from the inside, I think Florentino Perez's cold iron fist of running Real Madrid ain't that bad. So my question is, if you owned a football club, what kind of owners would you be? Democratic, dictatorial, 50+1, or go full Ryan Reynolds, or just let Thumper take club decisions?
Well, we've already seen that Thumper does not know what she's doing.
Thumper is Sid's rabbit.
Yeah, who wrongly, I'd like to make this very clear, wrongly predicted that Celta and Real Madrid would draw. Very, very poor predictions. What kind of owner would I be? Probably a very bad one. I'm not sure I trust myself to own and run a club successfully. I do think that one of the things that always strikes me is that it doesn't actually take a huge amount, and I think it's really important to engage your fans, to make your fans feel participants in it. And while it is true that clubs can't allow themselves, if they have a long-term strategy, if they have a plan, to be kind of conditioned by if you like, the ups and downs of the emotional side of the game and the fans getting irritated about things. And obviously the other thing is it's not like there's one monolithic group of fans who all feel exactly the same way. But I do think that engagement with the fans is really important, a sense of making sure the fans feel like they're participants in what you're doing, that they feel represented by the club. And I think that's something that's quite easy to do, and just it seems gets overlooked very, very quickly. So I think that's part of it. Now, obviously, the question said if you're the owner of the club, and so then that question then becomes about, would it be a 49 plus 51 thing? Well, if you're owner of the club, then you're not giving up any control. But what you can do is have participation. That's not quite the same thing. I suppose there is that thing where you say, well, actually, would you take over a club and say, okay, I'm going to give up 49%. I'm going to make sure I maintain control. But then you've got obviously the financial elements of that. And in fact, part of the debate at the moment about the possibility of changing the structure at Real Madrid more than at Barcelona, because Laporta has always said that he won't change it. Although, of course, he effectively has partners with those who have bought these various assets of the club. If you do that, you then get in a financial construction, which is quite complex. So I don't know if
it would be a terrible owner. I wouldn't be much better.
So. I think I'd be quite a bad owner. But I think I certainly wouldn't be a dictatorial one. I just don't think it's in my nature. But maybe I should.
You'd be too nice. You'd be too nice. You'd be trying to please everyone and try to not charge too much for everyone, make everything nice and cheap, make it a nice little, and just run it terribly business way. And I'm not sure it'd be great. But
it is interesting, isn't it, Phil, when we've had conversations with people who own or run clubs, that there is that sense from them. And I absolutely understand it, by the way, when they sometimes think, my God, the fans, they're honest about everything. And they're honest about everything. And there is sometimes this idea that the person running your football club is evil and is deliberately doing it wrong. And that's not always the case.
No.
Quite often. In fact, most of the time it's not. Yeah, sometimes it is. There's one or two I can think of. But it's not often the case, to be honest.
Okay, this is one of the strangest names that anybody on our Patreon has come up with, but Baby Wants Some Milk says, Hola, Spa. Okay. Question for you all. If you could have any role at any club, excluding being a player, manager, or president, what would it be and why? Well, what are the options then? Kitman, physio, analyst?
Well, I suppose here's the answer. Given the job that we do, isn't it director of communications?
I don't think I fancy that.
No, I don't think I fancy it very much. But I suppose it's what we're qualified.
Yeah.
I guess it's what we're qualified for. I suppose I could be club historian. There you go.
Oh yeah, you'd be good at that.
Club historian and museum curator.
I wouldn't trust you with a club's Twitter account. Absolutely no chance. My God, disastrous.
Imagine that. Real Oviedo suddenly wading in on Trump.
Yeah. Tim says, Hola, Spa. Over the last few years, we've seen several La Liga stars from the 2010s get their big breaks in managing. Xavi Hernandez, Xabi Alonso, Felipe Luis. However, one name hasn't really been discussed that intrigued me, and that was the work of Arda Turan at Shakhtar Donetsk.
Yeah.
I completely hadn't clicked that he was there. I was curious if he had struck you as someone who would be successful as a future manager during his playing days.
No. And
no.
I think it's very curious as well because he was a player. I mean, he was a player who was kind of nominative determinism. Arda Turan. I mean, he went from Atletico Madrid to Barcelona and basically said, "I'm looking forward to the chance to not run around as much." And he went to a Luis Enrique team. You think, hang on, you are still going to have to run. He, as a character, was very, very well liked, but he wasn't seen as the guy that analyzes the game. He wasn't seen as the guy that's kind of wholehearted and committed. All of those, I suppose, slightly cliched qualities that we talk about when we talk about managers, they weren't really there with him.
Who did he throw his shoe at?
The referee. That was absolutely brilliant. The Calderon.
He took his shoe off.
I think he'd been sent off at the ref. Yeah. No, wait. Hang on. And didn't he pick up a bit of mud as well? I can't remember now, but yes. He threw his shoe. It's quite brilliant.
Paco says, Hola Troncos, writing from just outside the M30. I was at the belated Phil and Sid derby, Real Oviedo. At halftime, while I was eating my bocata de lomo y queso, I focused a lot on Santi Cazorla's warm-up. Being probably the last time I would have the privilege to watch him play, I couldn't but marvel at his silky touch and how gracefully and accurately he made his passes at the ripe old age of 41. Luckily, we got to see him subbed on in the second half to the rousing applause of the entire Estadio de Vallecas, a really touching moment. Thinking about veteran players, I was wondering if you've ever done an old player starting 11 in La Liga. Players who are 35 plus currently playing. Cazorla must surely be there, Iago Aspas, Dani Parejo, etc. And also shout out to our very own Oscar Chocota Trejo.
Oh, okay. So you're asking for one. We haven't done one.
We're
asking for one. I mean, you've just given us the best of the names there. Lewandowski's pretty old.
Yeah, there's a few that are 34. I feel like I'm just on the cusp, Griezmann.
Yes, that don't necessarily count as old yet, but are just about to get there. But although Griezmann obviously looks like he's about to go.
Lejeune.
Is Lejeune that old? Is he that old? I love Lejeune. I think he's amazing. Yeah. How old is Danny Carvajal?
He's 34.
He's 34. There you go. The man who's won as many European Cups as anyone else in history. I'm all for an old players 11. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Rayo have the oldest 11, the oldest squad in La Liga.
Do they?
On average. Yeah, very few youngsters.
Is that because I was going to say? Is that because a lot of them are old, or just because there aren't kids coming through at Rayo, so there's no one to drag the average down? Because I don't feel like Rayo have got a really ancient player.
No, it's just I know, generally quite old. Kike Garcia, 36.
Yeah, the labourer of goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there we go. Some names. We haven't really done an 11. And there's not much structure to it. We've got a couple of.
We haven't got a goalkeeper yet, have we? I don't think we've got a goalkeeper. Who's the oldest goalie still around? Who's quite good?
They're all quite. I mean, goalkeepers get on a bit, don't they? So,
well, in theory they do, but I can't think of an old goalkeeper who's really good
in La Liga.
Yeah.
Ter Stegen and Oblak are both 33.
Yeah, that's not really old, is it? Especially not for keepers.
No. Oof, there's got to be some.
There has to be, but I can't think of one. How old's Adrian, substitute goalkeeper at Betis? He feels like he's been around for a while.
Yeah, he's not getting in. He's not good enough. Sorry, we've got to have some kind of standards. Adrian! He's got to have some kind of standards. Marko Dimitrovic is 34, nearly 35.
Ooh.
So maybe
penalty scoring goalkeeper and hard as nails. Yeah, I could have him in there.
Jordi says, Hola Spa from Newcastle, Australia.
Oh, so it's a long way to tonight's game. I thought, you could pop into the match, but maybe not.
On the interview Xavi did regarding Messi, whose relationship is more damaged, Xavi, Messi, or Laporta? And if this was possible before, is this interview any indication that a Messi return is or is not ruled out?
No, right. Okay. So I suppose the question is, when you say whose relationship is more damaged, whose relationship with who? Yeah. Because the club at the moment, I suppose, is the president. I mean, bear in mind that one man is in and the other two men are not in. What it does do is it makes any chance of a return for the two men who are currently not in harder, unless, of course, there was a change at the top. And I don't think there's going to be. I think Laporta's going to win. We discussed this a little bit on yesterday's pod. I think that the aim of this clearly was to try and tilt the balance away from Laporta in the presidential elections. But I think it actually damages Xavi more than it damages Laporta, partly because Laporta has a lot of popular support, but also I think because the nature of doing this, even those people who think that Xavi's right probably look at this and think, but the timing was done for a reason that feels a little bit like electioneering rather than finally getting something off your chest, which has clearly been there and bothering you for a while. I don't think anything can really damage Messi, if you see what I mean. Maybe damage it in terms of whether or not he returns, because under Laporta, that seems increasingly unlikely. And obviously the suggestion that Laporta didn't want him to come back because of the threat that it would pose to his power, I think would still apply to a non-playing Messi. Imagine Messi came back as some sort of ambassadorial role or as a sporting director, say, or something like that. Then if Laporta was worried about Messi's power as a player, surely he would be worried about it as that, if that part of what Xavi is saying is true. I think it's actually an interview that probably hasn't helped anyone. If and I suppose it may have slightly helped Laporta, even in that it may have made some people who were just saying, you've really got to you should have treated Xavi better. I think those people, there's a lot of them will be thinking, I now see why maybe you didn't.
Yeah, that was the vibe that I got from some people here.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, I do think a lot of those Barcelona fans who are pro Laporta are very pro Laporta. So the second you turn against Laporta, there's almost this kind of pack mentality. I think that's true.
To me.
A little bit, and I think that's true. But obviously, in the end, Messi is God, so it sort of doesn't matter.
Similar question, follow-up question, really, from Vic, who's in Sydney, also Australia. He says, can you explain to us, those of us who might have a little idea, who is Alejandro Echevarría?
Alejandro Echevarría it's actually a very good question.
Yes.
Because the obvious answer would be to tell you what his post is at Barcelona.
Well,
and the reason why I can't do that, exactly, the reason why I can't do that is because formally his actual role is there isn't one, but he's the guy that kind of manages a lot of what Barcelona do. He's an advisor to Joan Laporta. He's Joan Laporta's father-in-law. He is also
brother-in-law, I think, ex-brother-in-law.
Sorry, brother-in-law. He is also he was also a member of the Fundación Nacional Francisco Franco, which is a pretty bad look. And he is I suppose, here you go. Should we use the old Cardinal Richelieu cliche? He's the Eminence Grise.
He's the what?
Eminence Grise, the grey presence in the background.
I see. Yes. No, that's actually quite a good description. He's very close to players as well, and generally he's pulling the strings behind the scenes at Barca. Tyler says, Hola Spa, imagine it's summer 2024 and you're making decisions at Real Sociedad. You have 3 incredible players, but long term you can only afford to keep one of Mikel Merino, Martin Zubimendi and Mikel Oyarzabal. Which do you choose?
I suppose this question is basically asking, did they do the right thing? And I think the answer is probably yes.
Yeah.
Also, we should put this into context, though, which is I don't think that you necessarily get to choose. Now, obviously, you do up to a point.
No, but it's an imaginary question, Sid. We can choose. We are choosing. That is the context.
Yeah. Okay, but the answer, in which case the answer is, did they do the right thing? I think the answer is probably yes. But obviously, any decision like that is made in the context of what those players want to do as well. you're suggesting you keep one of them. You're suggesting you keep
one
of them.
Who maybe you keep to replace them.
Exactly. And maybe the answer to that question is you get to keep one of them or keep the one who wants to stay. And essentially that's...
Well, imagine they all want to stay.
Okay, imagine they all want to stay. Well, they all want to stay. Yeah. Now, that is a very interesting question because then you're talking about finding a buyer for them. So I suppose the answer is partly who's got the biggest buyer.
Imagine they all want to stay and they all have buyers.
And it's all the same price. And it's all the same price for all of them. Okay, right. I still feel like you keep Oyarzabal, don't you?
I think so as well. Yeah. I think someone who scored that many goals, they have really struggled to try and find someone who can score goals. They spent money and it hasn't worked. And he's been the only guy. I mean, remember, they spent a lot of money on Umar Sadiq. They spent a lot of money on Ori Oscarson. Oscarson may eventually end up working out, but he hasn't set the world alight yet until a few weeks ago when he scored in the Copa del Rey and sparked the best chant of all time. But I think we'll go for Mikel Oyarzabal.
Yeah.
George says, may I suggest that Vedat Murici's brilliant goal scoring record is indirectly why Real Mallorca are struggling so badly. In exchange for getting him the ball more often, this has left their typically solid defence far more open at the back. The past 3 seasons, Mallorca conceded 43, 44 and 44 goals. This season, they've already conceded 44 with 11 matches still to play. Time to bring back Aguirre's suffer ball. George from a warm and sunny Brookline, Massachusetts.
Okay, so this is a really interesting question because I must admit it hasn't gone where I thought it was going to go. So at the start, when you said, is he part of the reason why they're struggling? I thought it was going to be because they're a bit one-dimensional and they played to him.
Just look for him.
I thought that was what you were going to say.
Yeah.
But you actually turned it onto the defensive side of it. And I think that's really interesting because now, not having the statistics in front of me and not having actually thought about it in this context, the intuitive answer, it feels to me, is to say that a player like Murici doesn't require you to break up your defensive solidity precisely because you go to him, precisely because you are, to use the Spanish phrase, chucking a washing machine up at him and asking him to head it towards goal, that you're not necessarily having to be creative. And therefore, I don't think you necessarily need to break your defensive structure in order to play to him. It is true that in theory, that Arrasate was coming in after Aguirre with the idea that they would play a bit more football. And that's a very loaded phrase, which I don't particularly like, but play a bit more football, that they would open up a little bit more, that they would be a bit more creative, that they would score more goals. And although you've pointed out that defensively, the numbers are not as good as they were with Aguirre, it still doesn't feel like they became suddenly a flowing team in any way. Now, I think Arrasate does want his team to be front-footed. He does want his team to attack, but he is still about ball wide, ball into the box. And that's a very, very simplistic way of putting it, but that's broadly his approach. And so I'm not sure that the correlation is there. And funny enough, I thought the question was going to be about creativity and wanting the ball and opening up and so on. And actually at the weekend with Demichelis, they wanted the ball a lot more. And Murici still scored 2. So I was getting ready to give you the answer that says, well, going direct doesn't mean, stopping going direct doesn't mean he won't score anymore, because he got to the weekend when they didn't go direct. And actually the second goal was gorgeous, by the way. Very un-Murici-like.
John says, we've got a few questions here on Real Madrid. John says, hello, John from Glasgow here. I wanted to discuss Real Madrid's transfer policy and why it shouldn't be a surprise that the squad isn't at the quality of a few years ago. The net spend on the squad is 300 million euros in the last 10 years. I understand they've done well in free transfer market and the wages are high, but is it a surprise that they can't compete at top level in the Champions League in the last few seasons without spending money? I mean, they did win it 2 years ago, but and
I do think there is the numbers you've given out. I do think point to something that we've talked about that does sometimes get overlooked. I think there is a perception that Real Madrid can just buy whoever they want, and that's not actually true. And the policy has been one very clearly of austerity over the last 7 or 8 years. And that figure was for the last 10, wasn't it? Now, that's not to say that they don't spend big in key moments. Chouameni was 80 million. Carreras was 65 million. Howson, I think, was 60 million.
Bellingham was 100 million.
Bellingham was 100 and something million, yeah. And obviously Mbappe was free, but the salary you're paying him is absolutely colossal. Obviously, there's been huge.
I mean, even Vinicius was 50 million as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, Vinicius was 50 million. Rodrigo was 45 million. These were teenagers at the time. And we've talked about how Real Madrid's policy has shifted towards trying to get players in a bit younger, not entirely, because there's also a degree of tension internally about what you're looking for, what you're trying to sign, who you want to have. You also have to look at this in the context of the money spent on the stadium, which has cost an absolute fortune and actually hasn't been a huge success yet.
No, it's been a disaster economically, the stadium, because they haven't been able to use it for concerts, which is what they had planned for entirely. It was supposed to bring in huge amounts of money because of that, and they have run into massive legal issues with the neighbours who've taken them to court and been very successful. So that is a huge oversight, which isn't really being talked about in the media at all. But it's borderline catastrophic for Real Madrid if that's not sorted out very soon.
It's also incredible that the most basic thing of all wasn't dealt with. If you want to stadium concerts, you soundproof it, and it seems the most basic thing of all, and it just wasn't handled. I should point out here that you literally mean the neighbours, not Atletico Madrid. I quite like the idea though of Atletico Madrid taking Real Madrid to court for making too much noise. And it has been a disaster, and Madrid tried to change the narrative, which was say, the concerts don't really matter, it's not a big part of our income. But wait a minute, 3 months ago you were telling us this was enormous, this was the game change, this was the next generation, all the rest of it. But I think you're right that there is a slight undermining of Real Madrid over that time. But I also think that financial impact, while it's real, shouldn't prevent us from discussing the cultural and structural elements of getting it wrong in terms of coaches' authority, choosing the right players, and that kind of issue.
Al has pointed out the question that we had a few minutes ago about what position at a club we would hold if we could. You're literally the head of Real Oviedo's foundation, Sid.
Oh yeah, I suppose I am. Yeah, I'm doing a great job.
Yes, Sid is the head of the Real Oviedo Foundation, and he's sort of forgotten about that. But there we go.
Yeah,
how's that going? Is that
it's good? Yeah,
it's going really well.
League.
Tushar says, Hola Spa, I know it's always been a tiresome discussion regarding the coaches at Madrid, whether they are classified as either a man manager or a tactician, and nothing in between.
Exactly,
even more so this season. However, I just want to say the bleeding obvious, even though it might hurt some. I don't think so. This group of players is that good I don't think this group of players is as good as we perceive them to be. Debate about the type of coach should be out the window. If they want to start winning again, they need to replace a bunch of them. I mean, this is a narrative that's being put forward by a lot of Real Madrid supporters now. We need a clear out.
Yeah. Now, I think the we need a clear out thing is the normal angry response to things going bad. Exactly. And I don't think it's particularly helpful, and I don't think it's accurate. I agree with the start of the premise of the question, which is that there are a handful of players in this team that are not quite as good as we think, or as good as we build them up to be.
That said, name names, Sydney.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this all season. You tell me who in that midfield is running a game for you.
Okay, but
you tell me who
is that those players aren't good, or that there's not a player to do a specific role?
That player doesn't exist at Real Madrid, but the players that we assume can play that role, or the players that are trying to play that role, can't, in my view. Fede Valverde is a good example of that. A brilliant athlete, but you can't ask Fede Valverde to run the game for the middle of midfield. It's just not going to happen. Ask yourself, how good really are the attacking players on the right-hand side of the pitch? Now, with time, Mastantuono might turn out to be brilliant. I'm honestly not sure about that. With time, I think Gula will be a really, really good player. But is that actually his natural place? So that's not particularly good. I look at the back four, and I don't think there's a good player there, apart from Militao. Now, obviously, they're all good players. Exactly. They're all good players. But what I mean is, we'll talk about the absolute elite. I look at that back four, and I don't see it. I don't see it. I think if you have a player like Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I think is a brilliant footballer, I think the structure obviously it needs to be slightly different. But all those things are true. But the other part of the premise of the question I don't agree with, the idea that it's not about a manager, because I think with a structural manager, I think with some of the players they've got, I think you can do some of these things. And I think if you look at Real Madrid's injury list, and let's wipe Real Madrid's injury list out and say everybody is available. Here's a starting 11. I look at that and think that's a team that can win everything. Even with the flaws I'm talking about, you put the 11 best players from Real Madrid on the pitch and get it to work. So we're coming back to that question about the manager, and the culture and the structure and the authority and all of those things, I look at that team and think, yeah, that's a very good team.
I mean, I look at the team on paper and then I remember what I've seen.
So we're coming back to the managerial stuff again, and structures and cultures and how you make it work. And so this is what I mean by I agree with part of the premise, which is I do think that there are a handful of players in that team that are not quite as good as we think or we would like to think. But I also think that I don't agree with the second part of the premise, which is that this isn't about the manager and you just need to rip it all up and start again. I don't think you do. I think two really good signings, two good signings who are the right signing and the right manager. And I think this can be a really, really good team.
El Ref es un Juancar says, for all the talk about Vinicius, that makes you laugh every week.
I know, it's so easy. I'm so childish.
For all the talk about Vinicius feeling liberated after Xavi's sacking, I'm not sure I really see a huge improvement. Even though he's been scoring a few more goals, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Also, how are the contract renewal talks going?
Well, I mean, right, let's just very briefly deal with the contract renewal talks and just go back to something we said way back in the autumn, I think, September, October time, when we were talking, there's no problem, they're going to talk about it at the end of the season. And what we said then, and it still stands now, is if you're leaving to the end of the season to talk, there is a problem. There is a problem. You do not allow contract negotiations to go this late into the contract, this deep into the contract, with a player this good, if you think this player is important for you. And if it's not because you're letting it happen, but you can't stop it, then you've also got a problem. So that's the first thing. The Vinicius question, I think this is a really interesting question. And I think, broadly speaking, I would half agree with you in that I think what we've seen is better numbers from him. I think what we've seen is him look more comfortable. I think what we've seen is him look more enthusiastic, more willing to run at people. But I would agree that the overall impact on the team, given the injuries as well, because bear in mind, Mbappe's missed a lot of games, and so that's part of the context of this. The overall impact on the team, we haven't seen. I mean, Madrid as a team, forget Vinicius for a minute. Even if we're looking at Vinicius and say, well, individually, Vinicius is better. Madrid as a team are not. In fact, they may even be worse. And those two things may be related. And I would agree that I think Vinicius has had his moments, but I don't think we're suddenly seeing him back to the player that we thought he was when he thought he was going to win the Ballon d'Or.
James says, Hola Spa, question. When did this Real Madrid mysticism truly begin? It seems to be more pronounced as of late. By mysticism, I mean the belief that they can come out on top, despite all evidence showing that they won't. This league, for example, when they were top, it was boringly good, which in my eyes was an excuse to hide the obvious flaws.
Well, boringly good was how I saw them, because I thought for the first time in a long time we were watching a Real Madrid team that weren't conceding chances, that didn't look like they were going to get caught, that didn't look like they needed. Let's link this to your question. Didn't look like they needed that mysticism. So here we go. They're just going to get on with it, because I watched them and thought they weren't very good, but they were solid. They weren't getting caught. I thought there's a handful of good players in there. They're going to keep winning games. We're not going to watch them and think, wow, aren't they great? But they are just winning and winning in a way that feels like under control, which is something that we've not really seen with Real Madrid. And that leads us to the other part of the question. Where did the mysticism start? Well, in terms of the construction of the idea, we're talking late 70s and into the 80s, with the idea of the spirit of Juanito and the comebacks in European competition, all that sort of stuff, which in truth, and I've written about this lots of times. I remember writing a piece just before they had to do a comeback against Dortmund in
2013.
Yeah, around about then. That sounds right. Yeah. And going through the stats and saying, actually, it's a myth. All the times they said they were going to come back, it didn't happen. But then they went through a phase where they did start doing it. And of course, that Champions League, when they did 3 of them in a row, and they were unbelievable, those 3. And you can pick this apart and you can talk about, if you like, moments of luck. And there's no doubt there were moments of luck. You can talk about refereeing decisions. You can talk about cock-ups from opponents. The amount of times that goalkeepers who were previously good went to jelly against Real Madrid and just gifted them goals was nuts. And all of this does. And I suppose in part, and, look, I include myself in this. I hold my hands up as a guilty party in this. Sometimes when you can't explain something, you sort of go, it's just, it's just them, innit? It's just this. And it keeps on happening. And of course, you're searching for an explanation for something. And of course, the other thing that happens, and I think this is important, because you create a mysticism or because you create a story or a narrative, you also create certain conditions. And I don't think there's any doubt that if you look at some of those Champions League games and you think, for example, about Manchester City, and you think about when that game goes into extra time, there's only one team that's going to win. And so the mysticism plays a part because it's in people's heads. But I do think there is a degree of mythology about this. And I've mentioned this to you lots of times. That game against PSG.
Yeah.
The other part of the story, which I think is a myth or a lie, is this idea that the Bernabeu raises them and carries them through. I apologize for this, and Real Madrid fans, some fans might get annoyed with me for saying this. I just don't think that's true.
No, I disagree. I think it is true when they're losing. I think when Real Madrid are losing and they get a goal back, that's the moment.
That's exactly. But it requires that goal back. Yeah. So what I mean by this is it's not that the Bernabeu says, we can do this, lads, and it carries Real Madrid. It's that Real Madrid have to light the spark. Yeah. Real Madrid have to light the spark. Whether it's a fluke or a brilliant goal or whatever, they have to light the spark. That game against PSG, when they came back, they were 1-0 down around about 65, 70 minutes. The Bernabeu was whistling. People were leaving. People were leaving. And then they get the goal. The whole place erupts. It all goes mad. The momentum changes. But the fans needed that provocation to do it. It's not that they led it. This is my point. They don't lead it. And then afterwards, you get this thing, the Bernabeu carried them. Sorry, the Bernabeu was leaving.
All right, Passenger 8 says, hi Spa from an office in bafflingly mild and sunny Midtown Manhattan. Wow. Scrolling through the usual firestorms on Twitter following Madrid and Barcelona defeats this week, and curious, who is your bet for the player that will end up being Barcelona's starting centre forward next season? Fans seem to only agree about two things. Firstly, that Bob and Ferran aren't it, and secondly, that the club can't afford anyone better.
Yeah, and do you know what? There's a third dimension to this. I mean, maybe I'm saying this because I'm English, and maybe I'm saying this because I've been thinking about this a little bit this week because of Barcelona going back to Newcastle, where Rashford was so good in the first game. It's curious, isn't it? Because Rashford was brought in as the backup in theory for all three of the forward positions, and the reality has been he's only been backup in one of them on the left hand side. And I've been surprised that there hasn't been more of an attempt to play him through the middle. And I suppose that's because they've looked at it technically and thought, actually, that's just not his role. And we thought it might be one of them. And I do think Barcelona are in a position now where they've got three people who can play centre forward, if we're including Rashford in that, and none of them convinced the manager entirely. You've got Dani Olmo who could play false nine, and I'm not sure that convinces the manager entirely either. And so I think the answer to this question is, well, who are they going to sign and who can they sign? Because I don't think any of the players they've got now are the player that they would like at centre forward next season.
So who are they going to sign?
Well, for example, the story that keeps returning is Julian Alvarez. I don't see it. I don't see them having the financial muscle to make that happen. So I don't know. Who do they sign? Who's out there? Genuinely, who is out there that they could get, that is of the level that they want them to be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, they could do with Harry Kane.
I tell you what a player Harry Kane is. They really could do with Harry Kane.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a very good fit, but that is not going to happen. Joel says, hello, Spal, from a pleasant 23 degrees in Atlanta, Georgia, A-Town. Nice one, Joel. He says, I'm a new patron, loving the extra stuff as a newish La Liga supporter. I've been disappointed with Betis's play as of late, but really surprised to read that Pellegrini might be in trouble. What are your thoughts about Pellegrini's tenure? And if the club were to move on, whom do you think would be a good successor?
I feel like I'm going round in circles here, so I apologise if I am.
We have had questions about this.
because Pellegrini has been through a little bit of a phase where it felt like the end was coming, because it just kind of felt not wrong necessarily, but just a bit sort of like, okay, where do we go from here? And then, to be fair to him, I thought that he found a way that it did feel like there was progress again. So getting to a European final last year, progressing in Europe this year, and I actually think the European the draw has opened up a little bit for them, and I think there's a reasonable chance that they go a long way this year.
Yes,
I think the arrival of Antony last season gave this sense of excitement and magic and enthusiasm that kind of wasn't there. I think the quality of Isco gave them something a little bit different, and so at a time when it felt like Betis were just sort of drifting a bit and had maybe reached a glass ceiling, and you thought it's not fair to expect more. And yet at the same time, you always kind of want a bit more. And it became a tiny bit stale. And I think that I agree with the question, by the way. There's been times this year I think their play has not been quite as good as you might expect it to be. And I also think that there's been a bit of an evolution in Pellegrini because of the players he's got. There's been moments when they've been a bit more direct than he would usually have a team being. There's been moments, I think, or a lot of moments actually this year with Abde on one side and Antony on the other, where he's opened the pitch a bit wider than he would normally do, because he's always quite liked his wide midfielders to come inside, to have a lot of players inside, a lot of players of good touch, technique, and so on. I think we've seen things that have also made it more exciting. Fornals becoming a central midfielder and then being a ball-playing player there. But it is true that you just wonder if there's just a kind of a point where you think, all right, that's long enough. And yet, at the same time, as the question suggests, you can't at the moment question Pellegrini exactly, because you can't. What Betis are exactly? That's exactly what I was about to say. Could you seriously expect Betis to be any higher than they are?
No.
And they're doing well in Europe, and they were knocked. All right, they were knocked out in a very bad way in the Copa del Rey. They conceded a load of goals against Atletico Madrid and so on. Right, but fundamentally, there's nothing really wrong with them. And yet it is true, there's that tiny bit of something not quite there. But I think a European run will put that something back.
Another European run.
Yeah.
He's going to be 73 this year as well, Pellegrini.
He's amazing. He is actually genuinely amazing, Pellegrini. And he's incredible shape. And he's incredibly lucid. He said something to me. I did an interview with him once. And one of the things he said, which I thought was a really nice and very simplistic way of putting it. He said, you only get old if you don't do tomorrow what you did today. And I thought,
what does that mean?
Good on you. Well, it means, if there are things that you do and you stop doing them, then you won't go back to them, and you'll drift into, and obviously he was talking about in the context of, for example, he still plays tennis, he still goes to gym, he still walks every day, he still listens to all of these things that are about your vitality.
Yeah.
If you still do it tomorrow,
right?
If you keep doing it, you're not getting any older, effectively.
Okay, wise words from Manny.
Yeah,
Manny P.
I'd love to do an interview with him one day. So, Manny P, could you tell me about today's game? What were your thoughts on Manny P?
Lorenzo says, "Hola, Spal. What do you think about Wenger's proposed changes to the offside rule?"
I think it's demented. I also think it's unnecessary.
Yeah, just.
Right, I know people get upset about this, but I find it slightly bizarre. I think the offside rule with VAR, and I'm not a big fan of VAR, right? But I feel like the offside rule with VAR, it's one of the few things that VAR's really good for. All right, you can have one or two doubts about whether the frame's been chosen right and all these kind of things, right? But fundamentally, there it is. There's a line. That's the end of it. Now, I do think there is maybe a bit of scope for saying, shall we draw the line a fraction wider? But demanding that there's actually airspace between two players, I think provides an unrealistically big advantage to the attacking player. I don't think we appreciate how much airspace is.
Yes. You keep sort of banging the table.
So sorry. We
can hear that. Yeah. He gets.
Yeah.
Don't.
Very annoying.
Yeah. Apologies, listeners. Sydney. Max says, watch a Spa. Picture the scene. It's 0-0 in the 90th minute of the World Cup final. Spain against France. A free kick 40 yards from goal.
Oof.
Florian Lejeune smashes it into the top corner.
I'm with you.
And Spain are world champions. De La Fuente loves a French centre-back after all, so why not? I know Florian won't go to the World Cup, but should he? He's having a better season than Laporte, Lenormand, Vivian. How many Spain-qualified centre-backs are better than him right now? P.S. His wife is Spanish, so I think he could get citizenship. Well, you mentioned him before, Max. We're massive fans. This guy's played every game. He's the only player in La Liga to have started every game, along with Martin Valgent. He's played every minute.
The outfield players, you mean, right?
Of the outfield players. Yeah. He's played every minute apart from 9 minutes at the end of the game against Osasuna on match day 4. He doesn't rest. He's played every game in the Conference League. He's got an extraordinary sort of covering speed for a big man at 34. He can make tackles. He can play passes. He's got a terrific shot on him. I'm not just saying this because I'm a Rayo fan.
No,
the guy is amazing. He is amazing. And you're right. He's in much better form than all of those centre-backs. Yeah. But obviously, he's not going to get nationalised.
No, and there is underlying that question a broader issue, which is that Spain have a real problem at centre-back.
Yeah.
All of the people who are very good central defenders, and they do have very good central defenders, not one of them has played well this season.
Well, I mean, just play Pau Kubasi and Eric Garcia together.
Yeah, sorry. So that's true. Not one of them isn't fair because Kubasi. Even Kubasi's had his moments when I've had doubts about him, but he was brilliant the other night. Yeah.
Bocadillo61 says, Hola, Spal, writing from the West End neighborhood of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Brilliantly specific like that. The weather here is quite regular. Fair enough.
Regular.
Follow up.
You mean it's raining all the time? It's regularly raining.
Follow up on Athletic Barca. I grew up in Russia, and every time this game would happen, a Russian commentator referred to this game as a Clásico, saying that not only Real Madrid and Barca is a Clásico, but also games involving Athletic because they've never been relegated. Yeah. I only heard that theory from Russian-speaking sources, never English or Spanish. Could you please confirm or deny this?
Well, it would be considered in Spain a classic game. Not El Clásico, but a classic game. And by the way, just a brief aside here, El Clásico is a recent construction in Spain.
15 years, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, around about that. Yeah, it's still the derby to a lot of people. El Derby. It's still the derby to a lot of people. Anyway, but yes, it's very much a classic game. Yeah.
Patrick says, Hola Spa from Philly. I just listened to Sid's diary entry, wondering how does it work for planning, booking, paying for your flights, hotels, press accommodations, and everything else, especially when you work for 2 or more news sources. Sid mentioned how he wasn't used as much for ESPN, but could still have been working at the same time on a piece for The Guardian.
Yeah, sorry, those are two slightly different. I was trying to marry the two things. Essentially, I do it nearly all of it, and I must admit, I mean, you've seen what my notebook looks like, Kitro. I feel like I spend a huge amount of mental energy trying to work out the logistics of going backwards and forwards to various different places, and being there and finding the right flights and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's me. Mostly.
It's a scary place. It's notebook. You don't want to have too many.
That meme is it Julia Roberts of the numbers floating around her? It's kind of that.
Yeah. Paul Scholes knockoff boots says, Hola Spal from harrowingly humid Sydney. How often does a team come from the 3rd or 4th division in Segunda and then into La Liga? What's the most insane example of this happening? I would love to see Jerez, the tractor racing Guadalacín, or the mighty Sanluqueño come up in my lifetime. I lived in Jerez for a bit, but after a few years after their dramatic splintering. Also, who could be the Santi Cazorla of this region who could swoop in and rescue a minnow club if such a player exists?
Well, I mean, I suppose you could say that Pedro León is trying to do it with Murcia.
Yes.
Danny Guiz is still playing, albeit a couple of levels below this. In fact, he used to play for Atlético Sanluqueño, who you've just mentioned. Yes. I'm trying to think of an example of a club that came all the way up. Well, bear in mind that Mallorca, this current Mallorca, had been Segunda B, Segunda, and Primera.
I mean, Eibar.
Eibar have done it.
Which is more dramatic, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tiny little Eibar.
Tiny. Well, Eibar, I was at the playoff game between Oviedo and Eibar from Segunda B to Segunda when Eibar beat Oviedo. This is 2012, I think. And then when they played in the first division, the first game of the season, the first division against Real Sociedad, of the starting 11, 8 of them had played in that Segunda B playoff against Oviedo. So that it's not like they'd even, changed the players. The example of someone who came all the way up, I think this was the making of Juan Malillo when he started out as a very young coach with Salamanca, I want to say. I feel like I might have remembered that wrong, but I think it's Salamanca. So yeah, it can happen. It can happen.
Yeah. Gravitas 3K says, quickfire question for Kitro. If you could wave a magic wand and save one team from being relegated this season, would it be Spurs or Rayo? Oh, man, obviously Spurs, man. I mean, Rayo are going to get relegated.
Rayo don't need it. Yeah, Rayo don't need it.
I'm saying that, in the future, in the next few years, Rayo are going to get relegated, and it is part of the sort of footballing ecosystem. I've made my peace with it. I know that is going to happen at some point. Don't want it to happen, but they are not a traditional top flight club, and they are massively overachieving. Spurs going down is devastating and catastrophic and so fundamentally upsetting on so many levels that I would like my wand to save them from that. Bing! Please don't make that happen.
I'm disappointed that your answer wasn't neither of them. I'd use my wand to rescue Real Oviedo.
I mean, I don't even think my wand can rescue you guys. That's it. You're finished. Forget my wand. Rohad says, hello, Spal, from a very hot Mumbai. long-time listener, first-time question asker. Welcome along, Rohan. I'm going to Barcelona from the 28th to the 31st of March and would love to know if you have any suggestions on what I could visit or do there. Also, thanks for doing TSFP. Listening to you guys talk about Spanish football got me through some of the toughest days of my life, and I couldn't be more grateful. That's very nice to hear, Rohan. Thank you. It's a pleasure to do this.
So things to do. Yeah,
things to do in Barcelona. Sid, go.
There's loads of things to do in Barcelona. I suppose if you're looking at this from a football fan's point of view, I believe there's no games because that's during the international break. But get yourself along to maybe go and see some lower level football. Go to Europa, for example. Maybe try and go to see Sabadell play. Obviously, go and do the museum at Barcelona. I personally am a big fan of the Fundación Miró up on Montjuic, which I think is well worth seeing. And obviously, if you're up on Montjuic, you can have a look at the Olympic Stadium as well. Have a coffee in the little cafeteria where the diving pool is, which is famous for its footage of the divers looking like they're falling through the city. What else, Phil? What do you like about Barcelona?
So I would recommend someone to go and eat. Go to Terrassa Martínez, which is where we often send people. It is spectacular. It's up by Montjuic as well. You've got a terrific view of the city. Very good food. You will love it. So Terrassa Martínez is my suggestion. Obviously, we've got people that live in Barcelona who might be going, "Oh no, don't go there. It's too touristy or whatever." But trust me, I think you'll like it.
And you're going as a tourist anyway, so I mean, you don't necessarily need to worry about that. And there you go. There's Barcelona's amazing. Also, Barcelona City in the centre. Just walk around looking up.
Walk around, look up. Very good.
The architecture is very, very nice.
Yeah. I was just checking to see if Al had sent any messages on the internal chat because he's obviously listening and very much an expert on gastronomy. Al says the Sagrada Familia in it. Yeah, all right.
Well, obviously,
he knows that. I think he's got that one.
Although you know. It's
finished.
Amazing.
Is it finished? It's nearly finished. It is very nearly finished.
Do you know what? Genuinely. I don't think they want it to be. I reckon the day before it's finished, they'll knock something down just so they can keep building. That's kind of part of its charm now. It's supposed to be under obras at all times.
All right. Paul says, "Okay, gents, I've got a pressing question from you from rainy city centre Philadelphia that I think is a bit of an English version of Rincón Cultural, a bit of a head scratcher."
Okay.
Wow, Paul, this is insanely specific. Okay, I've noticed that most English football announcers talk of players falling to the floor. At least in American English, floor has a connotation of being the ground inside or indoors. And consequently, an American announcer would be more likely to know that a player has gone to ground rather than floor. Any thoughts?
The thought is that I suppose when you talk about flooring, it is like what you put indoors. Yeah, the flooring is your tarima flotante. What do you call that in English? Or your carpet is, well, that's not your flooring because it's not hard, but a flooring is what you put inside. So I suppose that's sort of true. But yes, we would use floor, we would use ground, we would use turf, we would use grass. All of those things would be appropriate for a player to fall on.
I'm not sure. I don't think I would say floor. Who's on the floor?
A player goes in there, hits the floor. I think you can say if he's getting taken out, he hits the floor. I think you're right. You probably use ground more than floor, but I do think you use floor. Yeah.
This is fantastic. This is what we need, Paul. More of this very sort of detailed, completely unnecessary analysis of minutiae to stop us thinking about all the other more important things happening in the world. That's what we need. Finally, Mark says, Hola Spal from the 8th wonder of the world, that is Edinburgh.
I thought you were going to say Getafe then.
Unfortunately, there is little spring. Sunshine on Leith is warning us up as yet. Okay, didn't really understand that. I feel that
Sunshine on Leith is a very famous song.
Yeah, I know that, but
Edinburgh is lovely, by the way. Wow, what a city!
It's a beautiful, beautiful spot. Terrible weather. I feel that Phil has hogged the musical debate in recent weeks, so in the interest of balance. Who does Sid think has consistently been the best indie or rock band of the last few years? And which Spanish venues does he recommend for catching a live gig?
Well, look, I cannot for begin to claim to have any sort of expertise in terms of who's been the best indie rock band. But the last gig I went to was the Kooks at Riviera, and Riviera is a probably 1,500 venue. It's kind of circular around the stage. It's quite nice seeing a lot of bands there. Obviously, bigger places in Madrid. You've got things like the Palacio de Deportes, but then you're talking 10, 12,000. And I've been to a couple of very small gigs. Saw We Are Scientists in a tiny little place. I can't even remember what the place was called. Chango, I think it was. Or was that where I saw Lightning Seeds? Anyway, I think it was Chango, which was basically literally kind of 150 people, and that was great fun. We Are Scientists are the band that I'm listening to quite a lot at the moment because I sort of discovered them by chance. They've been around for years, so it's not like I was finger on the pulse or anything. But there was a kind of a rediscovery of them because they were the support act with the Coral, who I went to see at Ali Pali in our hood, Phil, over the summer, and saw We Are Scientists and really liked them, and have sort of started going back to them now.
Who was the band whose CD was stuck in your car?
That was years? Arcade Fire, yeah.
So you could only ever listen to that one CD.
It was the Suburbs. I mean, to be fair, it could have been worse. I've had worse CDs than that in the car. But my God, I was tired of the Suburbs from Arcade Fire because it was the only CD in the car because it was literally stuck. Yeah.
That was the old school Podmobile.
That was the Skoda, yeah. R.I.P. The original Podmobile, yeah.
Yeah. Al says La Coquette is a very famous blues rock bar in Madrid near Puerta del Sol.
Yeah, I think I've been there. Yeah, there you go. Just a handful of little places. Claymores. Well, I think it's actually Clamores, but I always look at it and say Claymores is a kind of a jazz place in Madrid. Obviously, I'm not into jazz, but I've seen a couple of concerts there. Saw an Australian guitarist called Steph Strings there at Claymores. Let's call it Claymores.
Cool. Okay. Sounds very much not up my street. Let's leave it there, guys. Thanks for all the questions. We'll be back on Thursday. Bonus podcast talking about the Champions League. Loads of big games for us to reflect on. So make sure you're signed up at patreon.com/TSFP. Remember, we do this Q&A podcast every single Tuesday. You want to ask us a question, become a patron from just €4.75 a month, just over €1 a week, to get access to loads and loads of content. Bonus pod every week, Q&A pod every week. The TSFP newsletter is available to every patron. Doesn't matter what tier level you are, access to that newsletter full of goodness. So make sure you're signed up, patreon.com/TSFP. We'll speak soon, amigos. Adios.
Cheerio.